Yes.
5? 4?
Episode 4. I think it's 4. Episode 4.
Yes.
We've made it to the 4th episode.
I love how we start every
I know,
episode
it's like-
saying we've made it. Yeah.
It's almost like we don't have trust in ourselves to get to the next week.
Well, look, we're doing all right. We're doing all right.
We're doing very well.
So how have you been? How's your week?
Yeah, good, man. It's been very busy for some. It doesn't feel like every week feels like, shorter and shorter somehow. Like, oh, last week just went by. It's like I'm living in this studio and I'm only going out to do the rest of my life kind of thing, even though I'm only here for a couple of hours.
Okay, fair
You know what I
enough.
mean? It's almost like a portal into this thing. How about you? How's your week?
Yeah, pretty good. I had a bit of internet trouble. So I had the majority of the week without the internet. So what happened?
What?
Yeah. So what happened was I was doing whatever, doing some work at home, and then the modem just stopped working, and then it just, I was like, okay, that's a bit weird. So turned it off, turned it on again, reset it, still nothing, and then I kind of called up the internet provider, and they were like, okay, so what you have, we'll do a diagnostic test, and you have a bridge tap issue, which means that you have 2 modem ports and they're like interfering. And then I was like, okay. And they're like, so I was like, what do you do about that? And they're like, call an electrician. So I did. Electrician came and was like, oh, that's what they all say. That's not true. And then he's like, basically, you have to call them up again. So it was like this back and forth. So long story short, it was an issue on their fault, on their side. And the guy was just being lazy and just wanted to get me off the phone, essentially. So I got it fixed, but it was.
Do we name and shame the company? No. I don't think we've many Australian viewers at this stage.
Australian, they'll know Australian internet is
one of the worst in the world.
not great.
Yeah,
not great. We're so
it's
far away from everything, but also the prices are sky high for like 2 megabytes per.
Yeah. And one of the things I heard as well, that the reason why we don't have a lot of Australian internet-based celebrities around the world is because of our internet.
That's a fact.
Except we've got one. So, do you have a comment of the week from last video?
Yeah, sure do. It's by MZ Bombarday.
Bombarday.
He's like in reference to the drawings, the weird ones on like the corporate drawings on Google and Facebook and everything. He goes, yes, those drawings with P heads, I can't handle them. And I wholeheartedly agree.
So you don't like them at all?
No, I don't.
Okay.
Yeah.
Oh, it's almost like, but what's the alternative kind of thing, right? I think.
Anything that's creative and different. Like, I guess if one company did it, okay, but it's become like such a
template.
Yeah. And that's what annoys me about it.
What I would say is that because they've got the research to say that, okay, this kind of works, even though some people hate it, they kind of stick with it. But, the other comment that I like kind of similar to that is by Logic Zombie. He said, he or she said, I've also noticed more monochrome logos and icons. And I think that's true as well with a lot of the rebrandings that we've seen over the years, as recent as not Mr. Pringles. Why did I say Mr. Pringles? I want to say Pringles.
Right, okay.
I think I want to say Mr. because he's a mustache and does he wear a monocle?
No, that's
the Monopoly guy.
No, he doesn't either. That's,
of course.
I'm pretty sure that's the Mandela effect that you just described.
That's right. I read about that and still I went with it, almost like I only had one of the 2 options. Okay. But either way, like the Pringles logo, the Discord logo, like everything kind of removes the gradient away and keeps it very, very simple, or even removes all the extra intricate designs only to keep the type font or the typography, typeface. One of those 3. Okay. And I think that's because it doesn't look nice compared to what it used to before, but it's because they need to be able to brand it better on, digitally on the shirts, on billboards. It's easier to translate across everywhere and it's easier to kind of recognize. But again, it's the same problem, right? Everything's becoming template.
Yeah. Interestingly, like when I was designing the Cold Fusion logo, I had a similar thing because, I actually went to a design agency and basically they were saying, it has to be legible in the smallest possible size and also, printed out, but just instantly recognizable essentially. So it's very simple. It's the diamond, but just like hashed.
Yeah, it's like the application of the logos defines the logo itself in a lot of ways or shapes it in a lot of ways, because think of the lowest possible use or the smallest possible use would be the icon on the tabs, right? So now think of the oldest Apple logo,
which is like Newton under a tree, just like pixels.
And then you have that there. There's no way you can recognize it, but an apple with one chunk eaten out of it is more recognizable. So do you watch anything interesting this week?
Well, to be honest, a few things, but mostly I've just been watching Gran Turismo 7 stuff.
Okay.
So essentially just what people are saying about the game and some of the challenges. But yeah, it seems like it's quite similar to the last one, but just a few enhancements with like the weather and stuff like that. So yeah, that's mainly what I've been.
Okay.
Yeah.
One of the things that I liked watching was Colin Samir. Yeah. They released a video with Van Neistat, who I mentioned a few weeks back as well. The interesting thing about that video is they basically did an interview. They did a video about him being an artist. He's an artist, like purebred artist, if that's a thing. As opposed to a creator for YouTube, but he transitioned into YouTube because his brother, Casey Neistat, who's obviously famous in the YouTube world, does purely, vlogs and, used to until recently. So they've got this, almost like this two kind of parallels. One's an artist and the other's a creator purely for commercial and entertainment purposes. And the conversation was about, is YouTube a place for artists? So I think it went to very deep kind of philosophical aspects of use of YouTube and how he kind of transitioned into this middle area where he's compromising his artist self to do more of YouTube, but also, understanding how the digital life works, which a lot of artists kind of tend to stay away from. Like they don't want to use social media. They don't want to use, a lot of my artist friends tend to do that as well. They almost see it as a negative corporate thing. But Van used to be like that to an extent, but now he's kind of adapting to Patreon and Kickstarter. So his latest thing, he's still holding on to this art self, but adapting to this big tech usage for his kind of audience and building something that he can express himself with.
Yeah, interesting. So I have two points about that. The first one is, if there was a conclusion, did they conclude that YouTube was for artists or not? And I guess the second thing is, like, I can kind of relate to the artist thing and not liking social media. Like, even though, I have a channel with over 3 billion subscribers, like, I don't like social media. And it's a bit of a odd balance. But anyway, go on.
They did come to a conclusion where it can be good for artists, but not necessarily every artist, should use it. I think it all depends on how they want to use the platform and how they want to express themselves. But the biggest kind of takeaway was that they put art as a way to express feelings, and they put content, which is something we kind of cross over these days. The content is equals to art and art is equals to content, but they put content as a way of expressing information. There can be an overlap, which I agree with, but
that's really cool.
It is,
and I think that's quite correct. Although, if you're doing a TikTok dance, that's the
so
content.
there will be a little bit of overlap in some ways where, for example, a lot of the videos that we see by Casey, for example, right, they're quite artsy and creative, but it's also content for the idea of he's expressing himself, but also trying to get commercial value out of it, providing entertainment, all that kind of stuff. So yeah, I thought it was a very, very cool conversation that really enjoyed. Something I would watch again, because I'm kind of in that middle zone myself where I do identify myself as a creative person, but also as a content creator. But anywho,
just one more thing. I did release a new song. Well,
artist right here
on YouTube yesterday on the Burnwater channel, so check that out.
Okay. Perfect segue to that quick plug-in. But you did release an album as well.
I did, but it's still processing for the Spotify side, but it's out on Bandcamp at the moment.
So check it out. Bandcamp links should be in the description, so do check it out. Big news for the week. One of the things that's relevant to the tech side of things is that China's certain cities, Shenzhen,
Shenzhen,
right? And a few other areas around the provinces were closed down for the new Omicron surge. It's interesting because the rest of the world has had Omicron. Like in Perth as well, we followed quite an interesting border, border restriction. For those who don't know, we're based in Perth, Australia, and we haven't had COVID in the rest of the world for at least, I'd say, a good part of 2 years.
Yeah, like we're one of the only places that didn't have COVID
at all. If you look at the charts, it's actually ridiculous. And only recently we've had the cases going up because we opened up the borders. So we had quite a strict law in terms of, how we moved around and all that kind of stuff. And I think China, is probably a step further because they have a zero COVID policy that they're trying to implement over the years as well. And I think any one case or a few cases that go out means that they'll shut down the entire area, to the point where I've seen videos where they have barbed wires between neighborhoods and all that kind of stuff. So pretty crazy stuff. But what that does is, because that city is one of the biggest, it houses some of the biggest factories in the world that produces chips and semiconductors. Is the thing.
Yeah, I guess there's some of that, but I wouldn't say it's the biggest. But yeah,
quite a few of the biggest companies in the world.
I think it's more assembly, but yeah.
And because of that, we will see a supply chain
bottleneck.
Once again.
Yeah,
it almost feels like
we haven't even finished the last one.
I know.
There's still another one. So yeah, it looks like we've got like triple triple what do you call it?
Whammy?
Yeah, triple whammy of bottlenecks. So we got the Russia situation going on. So like, neon gas for chips. We got China shutting down, and we got just like general component shortage from the pandemic beforehand. Just two things: availability goes down, price goes up essentially for everything. So if you're still looking for a PS5.
Your PS5. Have you put this in order yet? Or
so the thing is, like, I don't want to play too many games, so I kind of just
I can relate, man.
Yeah, so it's kind of like if it's open, if it's at a store, I'll go get it, but I'm not going to order it online. So yeah, obviously it's been sold out everywhere. So,
yes.
Yeah.
So do you play a lot of games, or?
So I'm playing Horizon Zero Dawn, Forbidden West at the moment. I don't play a lot, but I like to, on weekends just play a bit.
It can get addictive, isn't it?
Yeah.
That's the worst part.
Yeah.
For me as well, I didn't have a PS4 until the COVID hit, the pandemic, because I used to stay indoors, and I really enjoyed going to. So the only time I played went over to my friend's house and we'd play a few games of FIFA or Call of Duty. But because of the pandemic, few months we didn't move anywhere. I was like, oh man, I've missed that stuff. Staying indoors, and I got one, and luckily I've only kind of stuck with Warzone. And nothing else, and that's only because of the component of playing with friends who are kind of different places, and I enjoyed that aspect of it. But it hasn't pulled me in to kind of play big games. One of the latest games is Elden Ring.
Yeah, I heard a lot about it, but
it's doing the rounds or not?
Yeah, so apparently it's got the. So what's the prequel to that? Like the previous series, what was that called?
I don't know. Do you know?
Yeah, Dark Souls. Like apparently, like that's a super hard. It's like a meme. It's like this is as hard as Dark Souls. That's what everyone kind of says. So apparently, this game kind of follows on from that. But now this is a bit of a segue. But I watched something that I kind of sometimes like to get into is just speed running and like different challenges that people around the world do with games. Okay. And there was this Dark Souls challenge where it was called like, I can't remember, but it was essentially like you finished Dark Souls 1, 2, 3, and maybe 4, I can't remember, but you have to do it with 0 hits. So it was like ridiculously hard upon ridiculously hard. And there were some people who got through like to the last game and the final battle got hit, and they just like, but like it was insane. Like it took years to for people to complete that challenge. So
and the amount of I don't game at all, as I just said, but the ones who do, they really kind of put everything else on hold. Like I have friends who kind of stop everything else and just focus on this new game that come out, and we went from chip to level 10 on certain games. But with the lack of chips and all those things, the idea of phones coming out, equipment coming out, even cars are all at a halt, because a lot of the companies are so focused in assembly lines in China and factories in China. It's like it's now become this, as you said, a bottleneck, because if one part kind of falls, the entire chain kind of falls. Like
there was during the pandemic when the last supply chain issue happened, there was, I think it was Ford, but basically there was a $5 component that because they couldn't get it in the car, like the whole production had to stop. So that's how contingent it was on that component. So yeah, things like that can happen. Like it's very, it's not that easy to just go and like swap out another part from somewhere else, you know?
Mm.
So yeah, it's going to cause a lot of issues, I think.
There was this stat as well, and I probably be butchering it because I don't have it in front of me, but it's something about 1 day's production lost means it's twice as much as like the Suez Canal or something. Like, you know how
the blockage.
Yeah, the blockage is like twice as much based on the city that's being
Right.
and this is the first time because previously when it was partially closed off the city, but now it's like partial lockdown of the city, right? So for 5 days, I think they said this week, which means we're looking at like probably the biggest halt in supply chain issues, pretty much the entire pandemic at this stage. So
yeah, man. So if you're looking for a new car or a PS5, just
now's not the time to order. And it's funny because a lot of the new tech's still kind of coming out, right? With Apple just so if you want to order it, it's kind of like. But funnily enough, a French customer got their Mac Studio early. And he's probably one of the first few customers to get it this week as well. So I think they probably have
a review unit, or
I do not know.
Because
I don't think it's a review unit.
Okay.
No.
Well, yeah, a lot of reviewers are reviewing it today, I'm pretty sure.
Right.
But I don't know, maybe Apple gets special preference because I was researching for the last, supply chain issue, and they had special an advantage over the car companies when it came to sourcing like TSMC's technology in their fabs. So maybe that, they've got special privilege and they kind of got all their stock beforehand because they're like Apple. I don't know. That's kind of what happened last time. So maybe it's a similar thing.
With a lot of the stock as well, there's this criticism for big companies is that they'll stockpile a lot of these products and sometimes they'll destroy them. I mean, not immediately when they can't go out, but there are cases about Amazon destroying stocks. Have you seen those news stories?
I heard about that. Yeah.
Right. I think so. There were different kind of accusations. One was to ensure that the prices, the price of the products don't fall down, or just to maintain that high level of price. The other thing was to ensure that to create the scarcity or artificial scarcity.
Yeah. I think that's horrific, to be honest. Like.
But these are accusations, though. I don't know if that's why they do it, or if there were faulty products. Like there was, as far as I remember, there was this image or a video of this Amazon worker who took these like piles and piles of PS5s. Maybe that's why you don't have one. And they just take it out on Jeff Bezos. And they just were meant to be destroyed. So yeah, again, like I don't know what the official story was. We'll look it up and put it up after. But
yeah, I think it's horrific. Like, if you're going to do something like that, just give it away, like instead of destroying it. But that's just what I think.
Yeah. Speaking of Amazon, they acquired MGM for $9 billion.
That is, that is extremely interesting. I think with a company like Amazon, it would, I don't know. I think they could do some amazing stuff with it, but also at the same time, it's like, how much is this company going to own? Like
it's incredible. Like I know a lot of people take it out on Jeff Bezos and all that kind of stuff, but like Amazon, like the world runs on Amazon, man. AWS has been a game changer for small companies, big corporations,
even the US government. Like a lot of their services run on it. So.
Even here, a lot of the places where I work with, they just, if AWS wasn't there, obviously there would have been other alternatives, on hindsight, but they kind of run, like think of Twitch, think of anything really, like AWS is involved in one way or the other, and the fact that they're kind of moving into other areas as well just tells that idea of that they will rule the world, or that they'll compete to rule the world at this very stage.
It's, I don't know, like on the one side, it's kind of like they own too much. Maybe there should be some kind of like Standard Oil breakup style thing from the government intervention. But then it's kind of like, I don't know, is that the right thing to do? What do you really do about this? It's kind of
so where do you stand in terms of, say, like, of course, monopoly is something that many the idea of capitalism is not to have monopoly or in its true ideal self, but it can go down that route, especially with these big corporations. Like, we look at Meta and Google and Amazon, and they have the lion's share of everything. And not even talking about the food sector, right? The food sector is only a few companies that own majority of the supply and product. So again, like, I don't know, how would you kind of stop that?
I guess in my view, like, when it comes to like pure capitalism, there has to be a balance of free market and the law. Like, you have to have checks and balances in place that make sure you don't have the company called Conglomo Corp owning absolutely everything, like, or else there'll be no competition, prices will be infinite, and it's not a good place. So I think there has to be that balance, but just where you draw the line and how you go about it is another question.
With Amazon though, they have really pushed the boundaries with the delivery side of things. Because once we talk about, again, like, what people don't understand is when they think of Amazon, it's like just delivery and initially it was bookstores. Like getting.
I think they closed the physical bookstores.
I
recently.
think they have. It's all online, and I think they've built those separate chains. But the AWS side of things, I don't think people still understand the depth of it. But I think, again, I also don't know how would you stop something getting that big, and ultimately you only have a few players just playing around. So
it's just an age-old question, I guess. It always kind of happens throughout history. You just have like one company rising to the top, and then something has to be done about it. So like, whether it's like Standard Oil getting too big, or you go back and the Dutch East India Company, it's kind of like, that company had their own army. So it's like, where do you draw the line? I wouldn't like to see
the army of Jeff Bezos.
Yeah, Amazon Jeff Bezos army, but it's one of those things. Yeah.
Speaking of other acquiring, it's one of the craziest acquisitions that I saw this week was AMC buying into a gold mine.
Yeah. Now this is a story. Imagine that, like one of the meme stocks buying a gold company. But the thing is, it kind of makes, if you're looking at it through like an entirely financial / investment lens, it kind of makes a little bit of sense. It's like AMC was a company that was down and out, and then the whole Reddit fiasco happened, and essentially it pushed that company stock up. They had a lot of money somehow, and they're like, look, our business model is shaky, so gold is traditionally seen as like it's a hard asset, but also a risk-off asset, and also something as a safe haven. So it's like, a sure bet. So it's like, someone was just like, hey, if we buy a gold mine, then we'll have like exposure to this commodity. But the weird thing is like, I don't know, it's a gold mine.
Yeah, it's like how. So with the whole idea of the meme stock, right? I've seen about it. I've seen stories about it, but I haven't followed it obviously as much as you have with the video that you've done. So how does that, like, does that have anything to do with this? Like, is this a way kind of them like thinking that, okay, maybe if one of those things happening, because that whole thing actually negatively affected the company, didn't it?
No, it was a positive thing. Yeah, positive.
Okay, right.
So
the people who kind of bet in later, they were affected.
Yeah. So to be honest, I haven't really been following the Wall Street bets fiasco that long after I did the video. But at that time, it was kind of like, it all started with this guy on Reddit who people were following. And essentially he was a trader, but he was noticing that what's the company? The main company?
GameStop.
Yeah, GameStop. He noticed that GameStop, was being over short sold by a lot of these companies, and like it was a risky position for them, and he noticed that the company position wasn't as bad as they were thinking. So I was like, hey, this might be a buy opportunity. And then it kind of became a meme and a movement. And then it kind of turned into, the people against the big hedge funds. And essentially they bet against the hedge funds. And there were so many of them that the hedge funds had to cover their losses, and it spiked the price up. Yeah. And then other stocks jumped in, like AMC, and it became this meme thing. So it was positive for the companies in terms of like, I guess, good press in a way. It's like, oh, these are the underdogs, but also they got a lot more equity and like money from it.
Right.
So so AMC was one of those meme stocks. Yeah. And I guess since their bottom, their price is, I assume, still quite a bit up. So they're just like, let's solidify some of these gains in gold. But then I think you were telling me yesterday that this gold company had a shaky financial history, which is what I don't understand.
Yeah.
Like, why don't they just skip the middleman and buy straight up gold? I don't know if that's legal, but like if they're trying to get exposure. So it's just odd.
It's just one of those things. Like, I don't know if it's to launder money or something down the line or anything of that sort. But it was very. When I saw the headline, I'm like, "Am I reading this right? Like what's going on?" kind of thing.
Yeah.
NFTs, man. This is something we haven't really talked about except for the secret episode, the -1 or -1, T -1 episode. But with NFTs, how do you want to start?
Well, I know everyone hates them, but I think that they may have legitimate use, like in a very small, specific way. But I think it's being abused like crazy at the moment. It's like everyone's scamming each other, YouTubers scamming everyone. It's just, not great.
Yeah, it's like, I think the understanding of NFTs is still kind of very low for the average person who's not into it. And for those who are kind of into the tech side of things, even then it's not clear. So I think a lot of advantage is being taken for it. But with NFTs, I think there's the one thing that we can't deny is the amount of stories that it generates and the clicks that it generates, right? As much as like this week we saw Instagram announcing that they'll add NFTs to Instagram profiles, which a lot of people wrote straight up like, "Whoa, what?" Like people don't even know what it is, and Instagram's like, "Oh, we'll add NFTs to the thing." So I think there is some level of adaptability to it. I think also understanding that NFTs and crypto, there's all the different terms. It's just metaverse and blockchain. It is a bit overwhelming for a lot of people. And I think that's why it feels like it's easy to get scammed, because and a lot of people say that they do it intentionally to confuse you. Obviously, as we were talking about that video, line goes up, I think, of the folding ideas or whatever. Yeah, we'll put it up. It's like 2 hour long, plus long, because documentary style. Hit piece is probably what would be a better way to frame it, is against NFTs, and some good points there as well, like how people are getting scammed. But as you mentioned, I think there's the other side to it, where when used correctly, I see it having long-term use for like plane tickets and for like event tickets and all those kind of stuff. And ownership is still that very, very much of a thing. But what do you think of the monkey profile pictures or the ape profile pictures?
I think it's pretty dumb. But hey, like, people can do what they like, maybe someone doesn't have an NFT and they just put a monkey profile to look like they're...
Yeah, I think that's the idea of screenshot as well, isn't it?
Yeah.
Like, you can just screenshot and put it up.
Yeah, but also it kind of, it gives a vibe, not just a vibe, but it's kind of like a brand image. Like,
exactly.
It's kind of like you're a person who is ultra on the front lines of innovate. Well, not innovation, but like on the front lines of like adopter technology, and so it gives you like a leg up in the field, if that's kind of the circle that you're in. But other people can look at it and be like, "Oh, what an idiot!" So it depends.
100%. It's almost like, the way I see it is that if there are people who wear graphic T-shirts to represent who they are, it's the same exact parallel that I draw. It's like, it's telling something about themselves that they want others to know about them. And I think that idea of being part of a community that thinks, or at least understands, as you mentioned, adopter tech, or the front line of tech, I think that's the idea. And also, I think that screenshot idea of that you can just screenshot and that's it, it is also misunderstood, because the whole point of having ownership that you can check and that can be verified is that you form a club or you form a community that only gets to be verified by that community themselves.
Yeah. So, well, I guess yes, but also if you're talking about the screenshot aspect of it and just saying, "Oh, I own this thing now," it's kind of, that's for the stuff that I believe, let's call it type 1 and type 2. That's kind of like the type 1 NFTs, which I think have no value. It's kind of just like an image, and it's like you can just get that anywhere else. But if it's an image that is attached to utility somehow, then you can have the screenshot of that image, but you don't have the utility and the ownership of the utility that goes with it. So, for example, Dr. Disrespect, who's a Twitch streamer. He started a gaming company quite recently, and he's starting a project where he's basically making a game. I don't know if it's an RPG or what, but yeah, he's making a game essentially, and then he's saying he's selling, what was it? I think 1,000 NFTs or 10,000 or something for $50 each, and then
That's cheap.
yeah. But then each NFT gives you access to a Discord, a special room, and then also you get to make decisions on what goes within the game. And once you're done with that, you can sell it on to someone else essentially. So that's more along the lines tracking towards the right use. So it's like you get this thing, you have the ownership, and it's like you're part of this club as well, but you can do something with it. So it's and you can sell it on, and there's not and those two things together, the utility and selling it on, is something that we haven't really seen before, apart from like a physical ticket to something that gets you entry. So I think that's a great use, but it's kind of being overshadowed by a monkey that's screenshotted and cost $10 million. So
I think that's the thing. Like that's the crazy kind of the tulip. And I think that's why a lot of people hate it. And I think even though Dr. Disrespect's been adding a lot of value, he's been getting a lot of hate.
Still, people are furious at him. They're like, well, you're scamming us all.
It's almost like NFT that they immediately think it's a scam, but I think that's the overlooking a lot of the utility side of things. And I think the reason why a lot of the things, like the ape pictures are so expensive, it's almost like, and what I love about this whole thing is that it just gives a window to human psychology. It's like, why do we value diamonds, right? Like it has no utility for jewelry in terms of showcasing that you own a piece of jewelry, right?
Well, diamonds are very hard and can be used for drill bits and stuff like that.
What's right?
Diamonds are very hard and can be used for drill bit tips and things like that.
I mean, I'm not talking about those specific use, but say when we wear it,
right,
kind of thing. Like
oh, I see. Okay, yeah.
When we were using it as jewelry, it is to showcase who we are, and we've assigned value to those jewelry, right? And then people just wants to wear it. That's fine, but essentially, it doesn't have a lot of utility for that specific purpose. So it's the same concept that we've decided as a society that digital currency has value, therefore it has value. Money has value because we have decided it as a society. So I think that's the reason why a lot of people are still kind of trying to get their heads around it. And we've been accustomed to the whole idea of physical currency all our lives. And now all of a sudden it's like, that will get changed. And also another comparison that I've seen is like, the whole, say, Da Vinci's artworks, right? So if you decide that, okay, I can take a picture of all of his artworks, then I have it. You can take a very high quality photo and then you can just keep it you can reprint it, you can get someone else to draw exact replica, but it'll never be Da Vinci's specific artwork, right? And imagine if a lot of the people who actually own the original pieces decide that, okay, we'll have a yearly annual meetup where we'll discuss about Da Vinci's work and stuff. You can't get into that club with your high quality photo or a screenshot of the Mona Lisa, right? So it's that's kind of the parallels that a lot of people do. But you can say, it's Da Vinci we're talking about, not some random computer generated image of an ape.
Yeah.
So I understand it's hard to get around, but
just quickly on the digital aspect that you touched on in terms of like we're used to physical stuff, but it's like in a way as things progress, like I can kind of see that this, in 10 years, 15 years, 20 years, like as things become more online in terms of like where people spend their time, like I'm not saying maybe for my generation, but probably for the next generation, they'll be more used to this. Like you put on, your goggles and then you go like your VR headset and then you're in this world and that's kind of where you stay and do like a lot of your stuff. And then when those worlds connect together and you have a lot of people in there, it kind of builds up more robust substrate for like value. So for example, the game Star Citizen, it's like people all over the world online, they play this game and like you can, raid people, you can team up and you can do work, like, mine rocks and asteroids and whatever. But the thing is like you earn this in-game currency to buy like a ship, but that ship is it can be converted back to US dollars. So it actually has real world value. So like that's a simple case, but it's like more things like this are just going to be more and more commonplace. And then people will get used to the idea of like, oh, it doesn't exist. You can't touch it. It's not real, but it still has value. So I think that's an important point that should be made as well.
Yeah, and as recently as this week, NBA also had their first broadcast of the Netaverse, which basically is a live broadcast of a game that has a volumetric space that you can go in and watch the game as it's happening, almost like you're in the court itself. We'll try and put up a video of it in the YouTube video just as a clip. But the idea of it is that these are the things that you can do with getting, so like the NBA could easily just say that, hey, you buy a season ticket via an NFT, you get an all access pass to this Netaverse, right? And you could say, why do they need to do an NFT? Like they can just simply have a regular ticketing system and whatnot. But I think all of it somehow can be connected into a more efficient system because everything's digital. And eventually that's kind of the way you're looking at, like the first step to this thing could be you being in there watching it, with or just by yourself. The next step could be you watching it with your friends and you wearing jerseys in there, right? The next step further could be you playing it as well with them in somehow or some form. Like the possibilities can open up new technologies as well.
Yeah.
And I think that's why a lot of the people who are purely kind of looking at it from a tech, from an innovation, from a community perspective are very excited about it. But I also can understand why a lot of people think that this is not the way to go.
Yeah, but I think that Netaverse thing is quite interesting because, if you're an NBA fan, like you would love to be watching a live game that's like, just going back a bit, like VR is the only technology that basically can mimic the feeling of presence. So you feel like you're there in that seat watching a live game, like being broadcast, but like in 3D volumetric space. I think that's kind of like a cool use for it, It's
I'm a big soccer fan and football fan for the rest of the world. And it would be awesome to be or watching like a free kick or something just from behind the player or just seeing how the ball goes around. Like all those kind of stuff would be very, very cool. Just getting stuff to see from a referee's point of view.
Yeah.
Again, the use is
if you could switch to change seats depending on the
exactly. And imagine watching it with friends, like different parts of the world. Like as I mentioned earlier, like the reason why I play Warzone, like playing it is less for the game and more because I get to be with friends in the same call in the same lobby, and it's like going back to like school days or days where we were just playing around in the pitch and it gives that similar feeling.
Yeah.
So I think it does make the world connected to a certain level, but again, what do you use it for? Is the question.
Yeah.
So it is it's pros and cons, man, at this stage, and I think we're very, very early with the adaptability of NFTs and all these other buzzwords that we now threw around.
The NFT, metaverse, blockchain,
and the Netaverse at this stage. On a bit of a side note, have you seen the latest Samsung concept release of Origami Z Fold? I'm butchering the whole headline again, but it essentially is this phone concept of foldable phones that you can shape it around in certain ways.
Yeah, I think it's an interesting concept, and I have seen it before. I can't remember if it was 1 or 2 years ago by the company TLC. It was a mock-up. I don't think it was sold, but I think the idea is pretty okay, like from phone to tablet. But I think the better idea is having a normal slab phone, but then you roll it out. I can't remember which company did that, but that does exist. And I think because the Samsung phone is a trifold or whatever, like it's really thick, and it's hard to pocket and everything. But with a rollable, yes, it's a bit more fragile, but it's the same thickness, but you get, the full 2-in-1. So to me, it seems like something, that's what Samsung would do, but I don't think it's the final stage of the evolution.
Right. This is an interesting comment on phonearena.com where I got the news from. Someone there said, we're entering a phase similar to what Nokia was back then, with releasing crazy mobile form factors at their prime. I think these devices are not going to age well. Might as well end up in the Mr. Mobile's YouTube series one day when phones were fun. Air glasses seem to be the future, with the mobile phones acting as a processing hub for these glasses until they figure out to move the processing completely into glass frame. Apple and Samsung managed to put a phone on your wrist. Now they'll put a phone directly over your eyes.
I think that's somewhat true. Long term, yeah, like, say you have like the power of an M1 Ultra in your glasses, right? The things you could do. So, and I don't think that's like impossible. Well, obviously now it is, yeah. But I'm saying in like 10, 15 years, like that, something like that could be possible. And it just makes sense to, have that kind of ability. But, then you have your laggards that want to still have a device separate from their eyes kind of thing. But yeah, I do agree that we are entering this experimental period because like when Nokia was releasing those crazy phones, that was like 2003 to 2006, 7.
Yep.
And then like people were still trying to figure out what's the next thing, how do we go? And everyone kind of thought like maybe it's miniaturization. You had that lipstick phone and all this other crazy stuff. But then, it turned out it was something radically different when the iPhone came out. And it's like, everyone knew that's the direction. And then we had this period of like increasing that and then like perfecting it until it got perfect. And then it's like, okay, so what's next? And then now it's like we want bigger screens, so it's foldables. But then, that will reach this maturity, and then the next step is just...
And it's almost like, with these new kind of versions that come out, people don't immediately accept it straight away. Because I remember there was so much backlash against the first iPhone. I think it was the BlackBerry CEO who said...
it was Microsoft Steve Ballmer.
So that no one's going to ever need an iPhone or something.
No, he said no one's going to... an iPhone, a phone for like $400 without a plan or something is like no one's and it doesn't appeal to business users because no one's going to want a phone without a keyboard. So,
exactly. So all that kind of stuff, and a lot of people echoed that similar kind of thought as well. So it only after the market tried to.
It was funny. Sorry, I just remembered something. So like I used to have this friend. So when the iPhone came out, I would have been 16, 17. I used to have a friend who was older, like 25, and I was talking to him about it. I was like, dude, there's this phone. It's like all glass, and like you touch it, you can finish the zoom and all this kind of stuff. And I was like, this is it. This is like so cool. And then it's like, ooh, a phone with glass. Who's going to use that? And then like 2 years later, he had an iPhone. So it's like, man, like, people just can't, I don't know. Some people just can't see
exactly,
it.
Which is why I tend to side on the optimism side of things when I see something new come out, instead of straight up saying, it's pure crap, or it'll never work. Or I think just having that open mind. But of course, you can have your own skepticism, but more often than not, it's good to be open-minded, because when it works, it just opens up so much, right? But I just want to kind of track back in one of the comments you mentioned, or compared to that comment there about wearables on like glasses, right? This is something we haven't really seen take off, because it's been around. Like Google Glasses was like what,
2011, I think.
Exactly,
like that,
it's been 10 years. It's ridiculous, but. And so many other companies tried different things. You had the Snapchat as well. I think they tried those glasses as recently as Facebook and Ray-Ban last year, where they're trying that story straight to the thing. So I haven't still seen a good wearable glass tech yet. That's promising.
Neither have I.
And I wear glasses all the time, right? And then I can't seem to picture it in a way that I can use it constantly, unless it's kind of voice controlled. And
so I think we're in that position where we need a step change. We need like miniaturization in some way for the power, and also the use of like some kind of clever interface that we haven't really thought of yet. Because voice control, like you're talking to a friend, you're like, oh, actually, blah blah blah, and then like
this is where you need Neuralink.
Oh, please. So we're at that stage where we just don't really have the technology to do it. But I think it should be possible, just by the way things are going. But like how that's implemented, like will you just use like lasers into the eyes, or would it be like, 2 screens, or like, how would it be implemented is the question. But I think, there's nothing around yet. But I do believe like 10, 15 years we may have something like that.
I'm assuming the military already has.
Everyone says that. It's like the military has
something like with contact
a
lenses.
century ahead of where we are, and it's like maybe, but maybe not. So I don't know. I think as well as another thing is adoption. Like how many people would be willing to pick that up? Like some people might be worried that it would switch on while they're driving or something, and screw things up or whatever. Like you're always going to have people that are resistant to it.
Well, like they've kind of figured out the watch quite well. As a wearable, and I guess glasses would be. Is there anything else that you can think of that could potentially be part of the wearable tech?
Yeah, like I guess
A diamond necklace with the Bored Ape NFT dangling off your chest.
I
The
think
view passes everywhere.
I think if you went on Shark Tank, you'll get a 0 for that.
Mark Cuban's into crypto, so you never know, man.
True. I don't know, like maybe some kind of earpiece that gives you infrasound, or I don't know, or
Yeah, the earpiece would be a good place to go in. Yeah, for sure.
yeah. But apart from that, like what do you have? Vision, smell, taste. Like smell and taste.
Taste, as I mentioned.
It's not. Yeah, it's something. It feels dirty, like to have a technology that. Anyway, I don't know. Yeah, but apart from that, like I don't know. I think with apart from brain interfaces, like glasses and watches are all I can think in terms of the best you're going to
So
get.
you were pretty as we started talking about optimism when I mentioned Neuralink, you're like, oh please.
Well,
so
yeah,
with
so
Neuralink though, like it seems like you have some reservations.
well, yeah, because the monkeys are dying, man. That's kind of so. Neuralink, I did a video on it.
As in for the testing.
Yeah.
Okay.
So Neuralink, I believe. Well, we may get there. I think it's a technology that shows a lot of promise and will be pretty cool. But I think it's quite high risk at the moment, and maybe a bit too high risk for me. So,
because like how far do you go to adapt technology into human?
It's like, okay, so you want to interface and
I think
with
an idea is in theory, as is mentioned, because when I'm thinking, okay, like I can just think and then everything kind of goes away from my glasses. I think that again, it's an idea makes sense. So the natural logical step is having something that lets you think. So a chip in your brain, obviously, but it's so true that the risk is ridiculous.
Well, it's quite high, but but apparently, when it's the first level of it isn't to interface with an AI straight away. It's kind of to enable paraplegics to walk and that kind of thing and give function back. But I don't know. Like Neuralink is one of those things where it's like you hear that the testing is going okay, but yeah, some monkeys are dying. I'm like, well, I might leave that off for a while.
Okay. As we kind of venture out of this episode, I want to dive back into one of the more harder topics in some ways, that with Fed Reserve increasing their interest rate first time since 2018.
Yeah, I think 3 or 4 years, something like that. Yeah. So it's expected because inflation was flying and that they had to do something about it, because when you raise interest rates, that's a way to kind of tame inflation and bring it back under control. But the thing is, I think, and a lot of other people kind of think that they're a bit too late, because 7.9% is quite high. And that's by their metric, as in the government's metric. And that does some weird things to the numbers, like excluding like real rents. They do something called owner's equivalent rent and a whole bunch of other stuff, like changing out different foods and whatnot. And if you actually measure inflation by the same way it was done in the 80s, it would be at like 15% in the US. So it's quite massive. But anyway, so that the Fed's a bit behind the curve on this, and they're raising it by 0.25%, which is way below what the actual inflation rate is. So that the real interest rate is kind of negative. So the markets are probably expecting this, but it's still been a bit like chaotic in terms of like stuff like volatility.
It seems like the market is responding well. Like the last couple of days, everything's
kind
gone
of
up.
Yeah. So maybe they're thinking, the Fed's kind of like doing something about this now, so they're going to save the economy. But I don't know, like to really tame inflation, I think you were talking about this, like last time, I think it was 1980, rates went up to 20% to tame an 8% inflation rate. So we can't do that today because there's way too much debt. Like companies are like buying back their own shares, and there's like, everything's funded on debt. So it's like increasing to 20% on all these trillions of dollars of debt is a lot. So it's kind of like, I don't know, what do you do? So that the Fed wants to raise 6 times this year. I think that's what they're trying to do. So I guess good on them for trying. Like it's better late than never, but I guess we'll just see what happens with it. It might change the way dynamics go in terms of investing, and people might go from
respond differently.
Yeah, risk on, so like less investment in like crazy companies and stuff, and more into solid things. So that might happen.
And finally, just one of the topics you're going to see out the episode, Netflix is cracking down on password sharing on households. So they're not only raising the prices, they will also be very, very vigilant and aggressive. That's something they've mentioned. And they've kind of kept quiet about this. This is almost like an elephant in the room kind of thing, open secret. Like everyone kind of shares, like Netflix and Spotify passwords. So it's especially true in Southeast Asian countries or developing nations as well. So I don't know. It's something that they seem to be going at it quite aggressively, and it seems like they're losing money elsewhere, and now they're like, oh, we got to kind of crack down on this.
Yeah, I guess like if you've got a board of directors that are like, all right, there's profits. What are you going to do? And Netflix like, well, people are still in the password, so let's like kind of stop that. It's probably like low hanging fruit. I think
it is.
But it's bad for people that have been leeching for a long time.
And with so many different streaming services as well, I don't know if they'll actually deter people away from it, because now Netflix had that first mover advantage to an extent where they'd have really good shows, original stuff. But now with with
Amazon
Prime and Hulu and Disney Plus, Amazon buying MGM now, God knows what they're going to do with that. So I think people might just feel like, it's time to kind of, one thing that showed promise was YouTube Originals at start, but then they're also kind of tracked back. So there is a lot of competition for Netflix now, so they have to tread carefully. So I think it makes sense for their bottom line, but we'll just have to see how much it scares people away. Yeah. Well, if we had YouTube Originals, this show would be in there.
Oh, yeah. Number one, front and center, like digital apes everywhere. And it'd be great.
Yeah, we'll just get a Neuralink to just transmit straight into people's thing. But I think on that note, this is where we end the show.
Yeah, I think so too. All right, guys, thanks for watching. And we'll see you again for the next episode of Through the Web. Cheers.